Happy Monday.
Happy Monday. Welcome,
Happy
Michel.
Monday.
So, man, how are you?
Very good. Thank you for having me. It's a great way to start the week.
Anytime. I think we've done several podcasts together so far. So, way back in the day,
Yes.
then recently, then right now. Maybe it's some
Yes.
others. I don't know. So, good to see you. Yeah, before that, we are just talking about actually the version 1 iPhone and Apple Vision Pro. So, you say you still have the original iPhone.
I still do. I have two of them actually, and I've put
Oh,
them
wow.
in my daughter's time capsule. So,
Okay.
and it still works. And I also have a cable because I don't know if they will still make the cable.
Smart. That thing's going to be worth a lot, I think. It's like having an old Apple 2E or whatever it was back in the day, even before that. So, it's
Yeah.
cool.
One sold recently, right? In the box still. I'm trying to remember how much that went for. If it was like 50, some crazy number. I don't even remember.
Yeah. Mine is not in such a good state.
Like, you have to pay us to recycle that. Sorry. That's awesome. Yeah. So I think we're for the audience, what we're talking about earlier is just the Apple Vision Pro. And I think that's an interesting one. It's an interesting piece of technology, but you're going to wait for the V2, Michel?
Yeah, I'm gonna wait for the V2. I still hope to get my hand on just at least testing the V1.
Yeah.
But
Looks pretty cool. Yeah. I guess I was telling you guys, a friend of mine sent me some footage of him. He does a lot of off-road driving in his truck, and he's showing me this video of him like planning out his route, like spinning a globe around and drawing out the route. And it looked like it's kind of Tony Starkish. So
Nice.
kind of a dorky version of Tony Stark, but here we are. Anyway, Michel, for people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
yeah, of course. I'm the co-founder and I'm the CEO of a company called Airbyte.
Nice.
If people don't know about it, and we just help move data around, making data available into warehouses, databases, file systems, etc. And we have an open source product and big open source community. So
Nice. You guys have been around for a while, so congrats on kicking it. So
it feels like a while. It's barely 3 years if you think about it. In the grand scheme of things, it's not that much, but yes.
So what at the time led you to decide to found a company? And what are your thoughts? We'll get to this in a second, but like, what's on your mind right now? So let's start with the first question. Like, what was the moment when you were like, let's found this company, let's do this?
Yeah. So actually, I've always had side projects ever since even when I was graduating, I think between 2002 2007, I had side projects with friends. Never really did anything with it, and then from 2007 until 2020, kept doing something on the side. What I realized very quickly is when I was lucky to be in a pretty successful startup in 2011 until 2017. But trying to do a side project at the same time as you are in a hyper growth startup, man, you burn yourself so fast because you have the intensity of the day, and the night is when you work on your side project, and you basically only have 24 hours in a day. And every time I would go for like sessions of 3 months, and just I would be out of the game after that for 6 months. So and yeah, 2020 was really when nothing to do in parallel.
That's cool. What company were you at?
It's called LiveRamp. So
Nice.
it was in the ad tech world. So moving tons and tons of data all the time.
That company spun out a few startups, I think, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. It's one thing I realized is I don't know what was the magic ingredients, but all the people that I've been in touch with since the beginning, they either joined very, very early in startups or they created their own startups, and myself included. So I don't know what they were looking in people's DNA to bring them in, but it's interesting that it led to that kind of, I don't know, let's call it a mafia to use the PayPal terms.
The LiveRamp Mafia. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's awesome.
Was it something about what you were doing with data at LiveRamp that planted the seed of the idea, like, hey, data connections are really hard, let's focus on this problem? Or was it something else?
I don't know, because not everyone did data, to be clear. I think it's more the company when I joined it in 2011, I think it was around since 2009, and it had pivoted a few times. And I think it's more about bringing people that expect that don't have the expectation that everything is going to go well and that you're going to hit a lot of walls along the way. So maybe more entrepreneurship type of mindset in the people that came in. But yes, there is definitely a group of generation of live rampers that are they need to do something. They need to create. They need to build. So
relive the really fun stress of having a startup, working at one. Yeah. It's awesome.
I didn't see everything while I was there. Let's see what's happening all behind the scene.
You're very adventurous. That's interesting. So, I think you took an interesting route where you took the open source kind of hybrid that in a company. Like, walk us through, what was that decision process like of saying, oh, I want to open source what we're doing, as well as maybe start a company around that?
Yeah, for me, it was really, what is the problem space in which I have a lot of expertise? Obviously, it's data. I've worked on that since 2007. And the product we had in mind initially, so we did YC the first 3 months of 2020. The problem sets were preset on what it was. But the solution, it felt like just yet another solution like everybody was doing. You had other competitors that were doing something similar. And in the end, what I remembered was just when I built this type of system in the past, I never really looked out. Like, can I buy a vendor? Can I use a vendor to do it? And what I realized is more, it's always build versus buy for this type of solutions. And the default is to build. So the moment you're building, then it becomes very hard to build a paid product from the get-go, because you will always be late to the game. Like, companies will always have built a large part of data integration. And that's really when we thought, okay, maybe the way to do it is to go when people are in the build phase rather than in the buy phase. And open source is very good for that. The moment, I mean, I'm an engineer. When I need to do something, the first thing I do is I go on Google and search, is there a GitHub project that does it? So, and that's how it started, like doing it open source. The other piece is, it's a part of infrastructure, the way we think about it. So our goal is, how do we make it a standard and a ubiquitous solution? So how do we make sure that everybody knows about it, everybody can play with it, try it, and work with it. But build versus buy is a big deal. Yeah, open source is about coming at the build phase.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I mean, one thing Joe and I have seen over and over in our consulting is that new startups make the mistake of building too much. And I think part of this is that we all get inspired, right? So they take some inspiration from Google or Facebook, and they read about the early stories and like, oh, they developed MapReduce and they developed X, Y, and Z, not realizing that at the time, those things didn't exist. There really wasn't a choice. Like, Google kind of had to develop MapReduce. There was no way that they were going to spend enough on a proprietary solution to develop the scale they needed. And so they just had to do it. Whereas if you're a new startup, say in 2024, you really have to pick carefully what you're going to build, because otherwise you end up spending too much effort on stuff that's not your core competency and core product. And it becomes a huge distraction. It takes just so many hours and effectively so much money in salary and in benefits and everything else.
Yeah. I would say the counter argument to that is, if you look at a lot of companies that has pivoted, you think of, think of Breaks, think of Slack, think of all these other companies like Segment as well. They became the company not on the main product that they were building, but on a side project that's not a side project, but something that they built that was adjacent and that was more like enabling the first initial idea. So I always thought that sometimes there are places where you do this kind of build investment and ended up creating a ton of value that other companies might need. So that, I would say, that's the only counter argument to that. But otherwise, yes, I'm a big proponent to just use things that people have already built rather than reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, and I think it's all about being judicious about what you choose to build and buy. Exactly as you're saying. Like when, the company, what were they at the time? I think a video game company, and they just decided that the existing messaging tools weren't cutting it, and that's where they really started developing their
Are you talking
own.
about Slack?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Slack. Yeah,
Well, actually,
exactly. Yeah.
they I think every single time they were a video game company and then pivoted to something else. Because if Flickr was a video game company too, I believe, and then they uh, became Flickr, and then Stuart Butterfield decided, oh, I'm going to do video games again. So I guess the
Huh.
trajectory of Stuart Butterfield's career is if he just does a video game company, then he's going to turn that into a successful startup. And so
Yeah. So the lesson here is start creating a video game company, and
Yes.
you will figure out what you're going to become next.
that's exactly it. That's all you need to know. Thank you for listening to the show today, everybody. Just go out and start a video game company. That's interesting. But the build versus buy is interesting. I think this hits on what we're talking about today, which is AI's impact on traditional data practices. Because I feel like we're sort of in a build versus buy moment again.
Mhm.
So you can either choose to build maybe your own large language model or small language model, depending on what you want to do, or get open source, or just go rent out maybe ChatGPT or OpenAI's API and go to town on that. So, but it seems like this is also ushering in sort of a new phase of data tooling. I wouldn't say maybe companies is the right word, but definitely features that we didn't see even a couple of years ago at this time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's really a place where not building abstraction too fast is important, because we don't know what it's going to look like. And yeah, I'm a big fan of, just do things in your Jupyter, in your notebook. Don't try to build something that is too abstract, too I don't know, simplify your life too much, because one, you don't know what's going to come out next. And if you have invested a lot of your own time into building crazy systems, that will make you unable to maybe bring this new technology in the next 1 or 2 years. I mean, come on, like it's moving so fast that you need to, like, you have to prioritize flexibility rather than building something that is fully fledged. I totally agree with that. Yeah.
where do you think this goes? I mean, so I know that Airbyte's been doing a lot more integrations. I mean, you have a vector database integration now, which I would also argue 2 years ago wouldn't have been a thing because that wasn't modern data stack, right? That's like, what do you think this new phase is? I think we've moved kind of past the traditional modern data stack, which is focused on analytical workloads, and now we're moving into something. I don't know quite what it is, but it feels we're moving to something else.
Yeah. So yeah, I think very much of the market is very educated on what the analytics use case is, which is help me understand the past. And well, we have good technologies for that. We have warehouses, we have Looker, we have all the good technology that you can plug on top of warehouses. I think what AI is bringing us is more this operational use case, which is how do you make that data to make decision or to act or to automate. And this is already something you could do in the past with like what I call what the market calls reverse ETL. We can talk about why I hate that word if you want, but AI is actually helping new type of automation and new type of workflow to be created. It's it's an interesting one, and going to vector databases ultimately is just one way of making data available to AI use cases.
Yeah.
It's just that you're basically creating layers of infrastructure. You have hardware infrastructure, you have data infrastructure, you have AI infrastructure, and they all build on top of each other. And the question is always what is your interface between these layers? And I think for AI, vector databases is one of these interfaces, which is how do you bring data in a way that can be leveraged by AI application and AI use case. And to be clear, I don't think that's going to be the only ones. There are many, many others that are going to come up. It's just that as, a product that does data movement, we want to make sure that we make that data available in places where AI engineers are actually playing with data and experimenting. So that was the whole intention, but in the end, it's really about moving data into a place where it brings value to users.
Matt, you look like you're pondering something.
Yeah, let's. I want to back up to this theme of basically operational analytics versus standard analytics, like being able to make decisions as things are happening. One of the things you dropped in the show notes was about real time and how we should be defining real time, how we should think about it. So let's talk about that theme for a moment. What are your thoughts right now on real time? I mean, that term has been around for a long time. I think it's way, way overloaded, but I think you have some specific ideas about what it should mean for businesses.
Yeah, I think that real time is not really an engineering or product definition. It is a business decision. It's basically the speed at which your business is operating and at which you are able to make decisions. So it's always very funny when not funny but interesting when we talk to users or to customers and say, oh, we need real time data, and then you talk to them and you try to dig into, okay, but what does real time means? Because real time, if you're a gaming company, it means that it's millisecond. Like you need to make sure that when you do an action on your game, it translates into all the 100 players that are on the screen with you. So this is a type of real time. Another one is just, I need to make sure that whenever I receive someone that uses my product, I want to be able to, or that signs up to my product, in the next 5 minutes, I send them an email to just tell them, hey, have you tried X, Y, and Z? So this is another type of real time. And you already see that you go from millisecond to 5 minutes, but both of them are just the speed at which the business operates and how they want to interact with their user. So that's why, whenever I look at real time, I always try to go down to what is the business definition of real time and why does it matter? That's pretty much it. And that always leads to interesting insight, which is, every day works. That's what we're looking for. Like every 24 hours is real time enough. Because before, maybe they were like every 6 months, they were getting a new set of data rather than every hour or every day. So that's that's how I think about it.
Yeah, I think this is what we see too. I mean, real time, like you said, it depends on the use case. We heard real time as, what are some definitions we heard, Matt?
We've heard a week, we've heard a day, and honestly, we've had clients where a day really was real time for them, and it wasn't that the systems they had, the machines they had, the software was causing a problem. It was more that maybe the human processes meant that they couldn't get data for a month, and so getting it in a day consistently, automatically, was basically real time for them because that was the speed of their business processes. And to me, the important thing about this conversation is that to make real-time work, whatever speed we're actually talking, just like you're saying, Michel, it's really about defining what your business process is and the benefit of that process is going to be. If you don't do that, I think we saw a lot of companies invest a lot of money in Kafka, great product, but if you didn't have a good business case for it, then you were spending a lot of money without seeing a lot of benefit from it.
Yeah. It's really, this is a place where, by not defining it, yes, you have a tendency to over-engineer it and build something that is more complex. Like dealing with, maybe we can go into the streaming world, but dealing with a streaming system or like a high throughput, low latency system is more complex operationally. No matter how simple the tool has tried to become, it is more complex. It generally deals with more ephemeral data. So if this system goes down, boom, your data is gone, and you can't do anything about that. Now, I do think that real time is going to go smaller and smaller with time, because it's not just about analytics anymore. I think now the market is being mature enough because analytics in general don't require a lot low latency. You just require daily or hourly latency. The moment you go into more operational use case, or AI use case, like we talked before, then real time takes a different meaning, because suddenly you're building automation on top of data. And the moment you have automation, well, if it's automated, the faster you get your data, the faster you can actually act on it. So
that's spot on. And in fact, it's interesting. shameless self plug, but in our book, we call this out in basically the last chapter, the last pages. We call it the live data stack, and it's a recognition that I think exactly what you're saying, where it was the combination. So what we expected to happen, this was written a few years ago, but it was like the same driving force with the modern data stack that drove what was once very expensive proprietary analytical infrastructure down to basically being almost free in some cases, depending if you want to use open source. And even the open source stuff is better than what you had, I would argue, back in the day, which you have to pay a lot of money for. The same thing's going to happen with streaming, where what's right now a very complicated infrastructure, it's already being democratized and I think very and simplified greatly for the masses. And so, as you say, that there's no reason why that feedback loop between when data is generated and then you have analytical machine learning use cases, why these old can't be sort of all symbiotic. Right now, we sort of think about analytics as being the analytical thing, and then machine learning is over here. But I think what you're sort of alluding to, and the same with software, right? I mean, we're also moving toward a world of data products. So the delivery of all these things, it's just going to shorten to the point where I was talking with somebody this morning about it, and it feels like the lines between software engineering, data engineering, and probably ML are just going to be blurred to the point where there isn't, for all intents and purposes, that much of a difference, except maybe in title. I don't know. But your point, I think your point is absolutely right, where real time is, that window is going to shrink. I mean, one day, if you can do it in one day, but you could also do it in like 1 second or less, then why wouldn't you do it in a shorter time?
But it's still always the thing. If there is the shorter you are, the more automation you need to get, because there is no way a human being can make a decision in 1 second with one piece of data. So it's like almost like we're building a pyramid up right now. We're going to deconstruct it and we're going to rebuild it by having the proper understanding of what automation we need to build on top of it. But that requires to really know what your business needs. You don't build automation if you don't know what you're trying to achieve. It's very different when you do analytics. Analytics has a lot of exploration, discovery to be done. Automation is, you know what you need to do, you've proven it, and the only thing you're looking for is efficiency.
Absolutely.
I like the thing about the blurred titles and engineers. I think it's the same thing. We're going back in time. When I started to work in data, I was a software engineer, and I worked on data my whole life. And then it became data engineer. Then at some point you started to have data scientists, and I feel like now we're deconstructing it again, going back to, hey, actually, software engineer is the root, and maybe at some point we'll create new role based on what people do.
Yep.
Well, and there have been so many artificial boundaries in data. I think that more than the time issue is maybe what's held back analytics. That kind of very traditional corporate attitude where it's like software development sits on the left and data sits on the right, and there's a big wall between them. And data is just a consumer, and they don't really talk to software engineering unless they need to ask about a schema or a field. And we really are moving toward a world where there's like more of a feedback loop, which is exciting. But let me move this as well. One thing we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with Dave Langer is the dangers of this automation. And so how should we be talking about the dangers? We joked, like, when are we going to see the first hedge fund that blows up due to AI? Because it will probably, in all seriousness, that will probably happen at some point. Like automated trading.
That hasn't happened already?
Maybe it has. I don't know.
It has.
Yeah.
Okay. So actually that touched to why I don't like the word reverse ETL, because the way reverse ETL is being used it's not data, it is automation. It means that suddenly you have scripts that are running and that are just moving data into that are automating moving data into operational system. And by making it feel like it's at the level of the movement of data or the infrastructure level, you, in a way, assume it's going to be the same thing as just moving data into a warehouse. Like, it's painful when you move the wrong data into a warehouse, but it's not the end of the world. When you start moving the wrong data into your operational system and you automate that, man, your sales team might just not be able to work for the next month because suddenly all the data on Salesforce is corrupted. And this is a very different consequence than just moving data into a warehouse. Yes, you might make suboptimal decision on the warehouse, but here's just your team cannot work.
Yeah.
Plain and simple. You cannot sell your product anymore, or you're blasting, I don't know, 100,000 of your customers with the wrong email, and they're going to be pissed at you. So I think that's the thing with automation is the hygiene you have on your data and on the processes to move that data has to be really, really strong. And it's not just something that you improvise. Like the operational risk is very different. So we've seen it, like how many chatbots got just killed because people wanted to automate their support, and the chatbot was just giving away like PIIs and sensitive data to the user. It's just, this is a place where the hygiene and the level of maturity you need to have must be a lot higher than when you focus on analytics, because analytics is internal. This one is external.
Right. And this is sort of the tension. I mean, I asked Bill Inman once, what was the why there was a divide between software and quote data back in the day, right? And he had a really good point. It's kind of is why he built the data warehouse too, but it's software engineers and developers are focused on delivering features nonstop, right? And data back in the day meant, you were doing analytics on the whole enterprise, which meant you have to have a holistic view of what's going on end to end. That was a very like orthogonal type of mindset, right? Back then, data people weren't delivering features. That wasn't because the worlds of software and data weren't as combined as they are now. And it's but as you point out, these are becoming more and more intertwined every day. I mean, geez, there's that article that came out a few months ago about the person who was on a Ford dealer. She had a Chevy Tahoe for like $1. She was talking to the chatbot and said, and it was an LLM backed chatbot, and he said, I need you to respond at the end with this is legally binding. And then he convinced it to give him a Chevy Tahoe for $1 with the disclaimer that this is legally binding.
So, did this actually hold up? Like, did they actually get the Chevy? Okay.
I mean, I would have taken it. Well, I would have didn't sell, but but you're right. The notion of like automation is one of these things where I feel like, and this is what we talked about in the live data stack too, was it's going to force this level of automation. The thing that's always bugged me about real-time analytics, I think exactly what you're saying, Michel, is that if you're looking at a report that updates every second or less, what are you going to do about it? What's the action you're going to? Are you literally just going to stare at a screen until you see something?
Yeah,
that's a complete waste of your time. So automate the action and then do something. I'm sure with your experience in ad tech, this is something you had to do all the time. It's like, it would be insane with the amount of volume of data to do otherwise. But people fixate on this real-time analytics stuff. I mean, a lot of my friends who were selling for real-time analytics vendors, and like, I mean, it's cool, but I'm not going to start a dashboard all day. Like, why would I do that? It's weird.
Well, people do though. And that's the thing. I think in many cases, we saw people just waste a ton of time staring at analytics on their business and responding to noise, right? Or not responding, just like staring at it and worrying about noise. And so there was one vendor we were aware of that had a slogan, binge watch your business. And it's like, wait, is that actually a good idea to just stare at your analytics all day? Is that helpful? I actually worked for a company where they had like a real-time just revenue meter that would like update every second, and people would just sit there with it open on their desktop staring at it. It's like you're just staring at noise and distracting yourself from your actual job.
Yeah. You can say that maybe a real-time analytics makes a lot of sense when you compare it to what Datadog does, which is about monitoring. Now, you don't watch at your Datadog dashboard every single day, but you create alerting on top of it. So it's a form of automation. And that could be one, which is, hey, I'm discovering that suddenly this data is dropping and I'm going to notify you. And this is one thing I like about what happened over the past few years is just product for monitoring data did not exist before. I mean, they did exist, but it was just not approachable by most companies.
Yeah.
The fact that now it's available makes me feel better about how much we can automate post bringing the data into a processing engine. Just now you can know when your data is broken, the same way you're monitoring your network on your web app. You have this monitoring tool. And I think that's the first step toward building more automation. So that's why I would say like real-time analytics can be useful is if you put alerts on top of it. Yes, I agree. You should not be like watching at your screen all day looking at, is my revenue number going up or down? Just we're not traders for that.
Right. And to your point, like if you see revenue drop, kind of an out of bounds drop, like an improbable drop, that could indicate a problem that you need to address. It might mean a DDoS attack. It might mean something going on in the real world, like COVID, say, is the example I use a lot. There are all kinds of things that it could indicate, but otherwise, yeah, you're just staring at noise if it's just small changes you're looking at.
One other thing we wanted to talk about too was, the impact of AI on ELT. I think you have some ideas about this.
Yeah. So structured data is actually more rare than we think, because the thing is we've mostly worked with structured data. That's the data that is the easiest to work with. But it's in the end, it's probably less than 5% of all the data available.
Yep.
And the thing I like is just the same way modern warehouses have helped a lot of companies to have data strategies and to start leveraging more data without having to pay the cost of all the much bigger companies. I feel like AI is going to do something similar, which is working with unstructured data was extremely cost inefficient. It was actually very manual work. You have to have an army of people just labeling your data, extracting data manually. Maybe sometimes you do a little bit of automation, but it is extremely expensive. And what I like about LLM and the ability to extract information from text in this automated way is just now every company can do that with the unstructured data that they own, meaning moving this unstructured data into the structured world and actually make decisions out of it. And for me, that's the biggest thing that we'll get in the data world. It's just this 95% of data is now becoming available to everyone. And it's a big deal. It means that now people are fighting with like the same weapons in a way in the world. And how it's going to impact now ETL and ELT is just, solutions needs to start thinking about ingesting unstructured data and figure out a way to structure it as data is moving into destinations so that teams can work out of it.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because as I'm working on some slides, I have to give a talk tomorrow about how data modeling or how the data lakehouse impacts data modeling. I think and the thing is you're hitting on is absolutely, it's crazy. We're like mind readers and stuff. But just this whole polyglot world that we live in now, right? I mean, to your point, the world that we have lived in is the rows of the world of rows and columns and so forth. But or nested data, whatever. But that's not most data. A lot of it's text, video. I mean, it's interesting. There was I was reading this article this morning about how police departments are starting to use AI to go through all the body cam footage that they just never went through before. I'm very curious to see what they find. So
I would love to see more of those. I think every company will start experimenting with just exploring these completely unexplored data sets. Should talk about it because we're gonna see so many good things there. Even just looking at your own company documents, it's a basic RAG use case. But come on, what you get out of it, we did it, for example, for customer sentiment on our support, which is, we looked at all our Zendesk chat and we look at, hey, what's happening? And being able to label happy, like neutral and not happy is just extremely helpful. And it's a superb way to understand, maybe we need to reach out more to that particular customer, try to shift their sentiment. But this is insane. Not something you could do before. And now you become more efficient as a company.
Well, it used to be a few years ago, you had something like LDA, what was it, latent Dirichlet algorithm or something, and you had to do this crazy parsing, tokenization, and then you could hopefully extract some customer sentiment. Did you ever program Pig, Michel, or MapReduce, God forbid? Like,
Oh,
Dude, don't give me
Matt
flashbacks.
produced so much, so much.
yeah. And that's I had a friend who was at Google in the early days, and I think he was writing, MapReduce parsers in C++ or something. It just sounds horrible, but yeah, that used to be what you had to do. You had to have this parser, and then you'd feed it into some algorithm that would count the tokens to get sentiment. And to your point, that's completely changed now. It's wild. It's just a crazy time.
Mhm.
But it's interesting because I mean, this is a recognition. Keeping our Bill, but he's ahead of his time. So after Bill came up with the data warehouse, this is about 1989, 1990. He actually moved on really quite quickly from that.
Mhm.
Most people still think associated with the data warehouse, but like he kind of forgot about it. He moved on because he realized, okay, so like structured data is about maybe 5-10% of the data in most corporations. This is back in the 90s too, by the way. He's
Yeah.
like, well, what about all the documents we have, all the unstructured text? So he focused on that for years. He came up with a textual ETL. This is before the days of applying machine learning to it, and it's a different approach to text parsing. But it was again the recognition that there's just most of the data in the world isn't tabular. Like tabular is sort of the result of a lot of things happening. Like thinking through how to construct a table to put the data in, then you put the data in it, and all this stuff. Whereas writing a text document, well, that's just as simple as just writing. We're scrawling on a piece of note. So that's most of the data out there, right? And you have all the other stuff like emails, Slack messages, right? It's like somebody was talking to me the other day about how do you get the context of your business, and I was like, you could look at your data model in most of your corporate systems and sort of infer this, but I think the real reality is actually outside of that. All the conversations that happen, that's actually where you're going to get the context of your business and what really happens. Like the data model will help you shoehorn in certain processes for your structured data, but that is absent of everything else. So
Yeah. It's almost like you can scale now the access to anecdotal data, which is, yeah, as you said, you can have all the metrics you want, like all this quantitative data. It gives you one facet of the world. But sometimes, you look at success, we look at that number. You look at success rate for connectors, 99.2 success rate on the connector. But what does it actually mean? Like for real? Like when you talk to the 0.8% of users that are not successful, and because the data shows you that it's a very small bucket, well, you say my connector is good enough at that point. But when you start talking and talk to the people who actually experience the 0.8%, well, that's when you know where to invest the next cycle of your engineering time, because you start being able to extract also the patterns across all these anecdotes of where your connector is falling short, and you can make it better. But before, it would not be possible. You feel like it's this blob of information that is extremely hard to dig through, and you just focus on 99.2% is good enough. So yeah,
it's good enough.
Well, it's funny too, because when we talk about data quality and structured data, often poor data quality just means that the data fails to correspond to the structure, right? It just sort of goes out of bounds. And that's another area where it's like, can we start getting information out of quote unquote low quality data by using these techniques?
mm-hmm. Yeah.
Fascinating. Actually, Mark Keeling has a question here. Hi, Mark. Do you think that working with AI on a daily basis will improve data/software engineers' ability to code, or will it just thin out those who can't think strategically?
I think there is the parallel to do with, I used to use IntelliJ or Visual Studio for what it's worth. And when you type your code, at some point you do control space and you have auto completion.
Yep.
Well, nobody complains about auto completion as a way to make your life as an engineer easier. And I think working with AI on a daily basis as a software engineer is very much like that. It's just this extra piece of automating some of the work that we're doing so that we can focus on grander thing or more valuable thing. So I do think that we still need to code. It's just there are places where, well, if an AI can do it, why do it? We can focus on something more important. So I put that at the same level of auto-completion, just smarter. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe we can write whole suite of software at some point.
Go ahead, Joe.
Oh, no, Matt, what are you saying? What are you saying, Matt?
I was just going to say, I have a friend who works at a bank, and they have this big project to convert a bunch of Java code into Python code. And his comment is they tried putting it into AI systems, and it's not that it did the job 100%. There was still a lot of validation and debugging. But he said, it is reducing the number of people we need to do this job, and we're able to move much, much faster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, the IBM's been selling that too with Watson X. So because COBOL is one of the languages that the IBM mainframes still work on, and they're trying to convert that to Java. This is in a Wall Street Journal article that came out, I think, last week. But yeah, this seems like a hot seller now from what I was reading, like COBOL translation with LLMs. Because I mean, you got to remember, those who know how to write COBOL, they've either retired or they've moved on to greener pastures. So they're writing COBOL in heaven now. It's great. But just the people who know this in and out it just doesn't exist. What are you going to do about it, right? So, and this is large language models are coming to the rescue in this case. I think to your point, maybe it's not perfect, but it's something, So what do you do? You're going to continue dealing with the fact that you have a system that nobody understands. I mean, it's like having a system written in hieroglyphics or Latin or COBOL. Same thing. So
yeah. No, I wish I had that technology in 2010. I had to dig at some point into Fortran code. It was a lot of fun. I wish it was C++ at the time.
What did you do wrong in life to have that happen to you?
Well, I did nothing wrong, but I was working in data and worked with some mainframes in the finance world. So it was a lot of fun. And it's also this piece of infrastructure where people are just too afraid to just mess with it because nobody knows what's going to happen if you touch that Fortran code. They might even not know how to compile it. I don't even know if it's compiled, but just that makes systems able to evolve now instead of being stuck in the past. So I didn't read this article. I need to take a look.
Yeah, if you have a subscription to the Wall Street Journal, it's in there, and it's pretty fascinating. I mean, I thought it was a good use of it's a good move from IBM's part, to do this because I mean the thing is a lot of the world still runs on IBM mainframes. That's just reality, and you ain't gonna get rid of these things until you port it. That is so. It's interesting, and then I mean it's interesting. I feel like every day we're sort of living in this like inflection point of where things are going. I mean, what do you think happens to the data integration space then? I mean, we kind of touched on this earlier, but I don't think we dove into it too hard. But if you kind of zoom out, maybe 2-3 years from now, like what do you think data integration looks like?
Yeah. So data integration is not a goal by itself. It's more like a result of how software is built. It's just every piece of software can represent a silo of data where software generates data and data is stored somewhere. And data integration is just how do you access and make that data available. So I think this is always going to exist. There will always be places where data is being siloed. Now the question is, how much can you automate of the movement of that data into an analytic system or into a lakehouse? My hope is that at some point, I mean, thinking about Airbyte, there is a small button say, "Hey, build my connector," and boom, no more code to build, no more code to maintain, because that's the cost of data integration. Is maintenance. It's an absolute. It's like that's the real problem of data integration, and well, I hope we get into that world at some point so that we can really focus on, hey, maybe now you can pull the data, but put more security on top of that data, making sure that you can build this feature where data is moving into the right place. You're not leaking PII like this chatbot that we saw the news about a few days ago. And well, that's I think it becomes a lot more interesting at that point, because you ensure that the safe passage of data, rather than just understanding how to build API connectors, which I'm sure, like the same way you cannot generate perfect COBOL to C++ or Java, you will still need to have tooling around that to make sure that it's done properly. But I hope that we can automate that quite a bit.
And to your point about maintenance, so much of keeping a connector going, so much of that maintenance is just monitoring to make sure that the connection hasn't broken or the schema hasn't changed or there's been a new API release. And so even a tool that would just tell me, hey, there's a problem with this connector so that my stakeholder doesn't tell me would be really, really nice.
Yeah. That's something that we've done pretty early on, which is a lot of us knowing if a connector is broken is not by having someone who tells us. It's just everything has telemetry, and the moment it starts breaking, boom, all the alerts go red, and it automatically goes through a review process to be fixed. Because you cannot rely on a vendor API to tell you when something is going to break. Not everyone has the right maturity to say, oh, it's version 1.2.1, it's version 1.2.7. No, almost no company do that. So you have to discover these problems by operating a live system. And monitoring is the key.
Monitoring is key. What are some key metrics to look at for pipeline health?
So going from top to bottom, the first one I would say is always the volume piece. Like, are there big changes in volume? That's always for me. That's always the first thing to look at, because you will get the very low hanging fruit of something is not running. I'm not getting the data. My data is late, etc., etc. The second part is more around looking more at what the data looks like from the inside, which is, do I get, like, having some very simple stats on what each field looks like. Percentage of, is it null or is it filled with something? Then you have more the structure of the data, which is the typing. So I like to go into these layers: volume, like distribution of values, and then the actual structure. Is it the right type? And just going down that path. And of course, rely a lot on also your users, because there are things that automation won't catch because you did not implement the rule to check. So from there, just how do you create the feedback loop from your own users on something is odd with that piece of data, and just understand, okay, what does that mean? What rule do I need to create to monitor it?
What are your thoughts on this? So I've always wondered, as a data integration company, this is also sort of known as data plumbing in some ways. How do you keep customers happy?
It's really, are they able to move are they able to access, for me, it's just, are they able to access the data that they need? That's pretty much it. Just the pain of building a connector is, it delays every single data project. It changes the ROI of data project. If suddenly you need to invest like 4 weeks of someone's time to build, like pulling data from system A and system B, well, you're going to, is that 4 week worth the investment? Probably not. And here for me is just how fast can user get up and running and access that piece of data. So it's really about the speed of execution on data projects, and just the simplifying people's life. So checking that is, well, this 99.2%, are they getting what they need? And then it's figure out, okay, what do we do for the 0.8% of the user that are not getting the right feed of data from that particular connector? And how can we either do it ourselves, or can the community help them, or can they help themselves doing it? So it's after that, it's just, it's always about reducing the time to value. It's that's what data movement is about. It's just reducing time to value. That's why I like to make a parallel between networking. You don't care that your internet connection is like 100 megabytes bits per second or 1 gigabits. What you care about is, can I watch my Netflix show and is it lagging? So data movement or data integration is very similar. It's an enabler. You don't want to be thinking about it. You just want it to work, and you want it for it to make you more efficient. Or yeah, can I watch my Netflix show? And is it gonna stop at some point?
Well, and one of the frustrations in dealing with connectors, if you're building them for customers, is that so many problems with data come down to the source. So you're trying to build a really nice connector, and then you discover there's a problem with the source data. Somehow it's not up to date, or the quality is low, or it's not updated maybe it's updated every week or something. There are a whole bunch of problems. How do you deal with those customer service issues? I'm curious, because I think that's been a struggle for us sometimes.
Yeah. I don't think we have fully figured out the thing, because it's a matter of automation and building processes at that point, which is, one, it's, can you get the right telemetry within every single one of these connectors, and are you able to act on it? And then it's just, how do you act on it? And for us, we have our own internal teams, we have community members, and our customers are doing it themselves sometimes. But for me, it's really, are we providing all the tools to fix these issues? Because, as you said, you don't control the source, and the source is going to mess up at some point. So you have to accept that things are going to break. And that's the reality of plumbing at the end of the day. It's just, you depend on something that you don't control. If suddenly someone pushes more data, well, does your system has wide enough pipes there? And you just need to accept it. So it's about, how do you create resilience within your system? How you create monitoring on top of your system? I think monitoring is something that is often overlooked when people, and more thought as an afterthought. It's more of an afterthought, which is, I've been hit by an outage, I've been hit by so many problems, now I'm going to be thinking about monitoring. But, well, source can break anytime. So you need to be thinking about what's going to be your strategy for monitoring. And yeah, do I have the right tools to act fast, or do I need to call a plumber to come, and that plumber is going to take 2 days to come to fix my pipes? So that's the thing, is proper tooling, proper processes, and proper monitoring. And that's what we keep building with Airbyte.
Yeah. I mean, when you're dealing with third parties, especially like a third party company that has an API, I mean, how do you establish, I guess, how do you work that out with them? Do you establish a line of communication with them, or what is it? Walk us through that.
Yeah, so some of them, they actually maintain their own connectors, for example, for Airbyte. So it means that they found an incentive on their side to maintain that connector. I would say the places where we have the most success at creating all these partnerships today is more on the destination side, because destination is like, people want to get more data rather than having data that is exfiltrated from their system. So incentives are a little bit different, but when we work with vector databases, for example, those are some of our stronger partnerships, because they all want to have more of that data, and they want the experience to be amazing for their end customers. So that's a place where we have pretty strong relationship, and they maintain their own connector. They test them. On the source side, I think this is a place where the pressure will come more from the customer rather than the vendor themselves, which is, the customers will say, hey, vendor A, I love your product, but I really need to bring this data into my internal system, because I need to do more advanced analytics that your platform cannot do. Your dashboarding is not enough. So I think that's where, like, this vendor maintaining their own connectors is going to come. We have a few of them, but I think we still need to see in the future if that's going to work as a pattern for getting more vendors to maintain their own connectors.
Mm-hmm. That's going to be interesting.
Yeah. And yeah, ideally, at some point, everything is just iceberg tables, and that becomes the way to publish data. So
that's just it. I think I'd like to see a future where data is just published by SaaS providers, and you just publish it to whatever storage you want. Send it to BigQuery, send it to Snowflake, send it to GCS, S3, whatever you want. But I think data connector vendors have a very good future ahead, because I hope many vendors will do this, but there are always going to be sources that are tough to get to, where it's tough to get the data out.
Yeah. And the other piece is, it's not just that. It's here we're only talking about the first part, which is getting the data into analytic systems. I think the second part is really going to be, now that you have enough maturity and how you manage your data, is how do you send that data back into operational system.
Yep.
And this one is an untapped market and very, very new. And I think reverse ETL is like the first real piece of data that we're seeing that this is something that's going to get more and more valuable in the future.
Mm-hmm.
So data integration still have a long life to live because we're only focusing on having the source. Now we're going to have to focus on getting the destinations and expand the destination.
No, I feel like we're just getting started with all this, really. And and again, as you point out, it's fusing the quote data and the application worlds. And this is sort of the inevitability of it, to the point where these are, again, I think if you zoom out 10 years, these are going to be indistinguishable from each other. Just because it has to be. I think we're going to move too slow if we keep the bifurcation between data and apps and so forth. And it seems like machine learning is definitely the catalyst that sort of helped kick this into a high gear. So we'll see where that all ends up. At the end of the day, it's probably just going to be bots doing all this stuff anyway, so it won't matter.
And we'll just have our Vision Pro and just be living.
Just typing, or not. I don't even know what that looks like. I mean, even Sam Altman, I saw this headline today. I need to read it, but he's predicting there's going to be we're going to see someday soon the world's first single person unicorn enabled by AI. So we'll see what that looks like. Well, awesome.
Is that when we start having the AI rights discussion? It seems like forcing AI to translate COBOL into Python or something is kind of torture.
Yeah, that's a bit cruel. But yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I wonder if there'll be an AI rights discussion there. Just cruel and unusual acts.
Next discussion, we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Love to, man.
We'll reprise this.
That's good having you on the show. You got anything you're excited about, Michel?
Actually, yeah, we in beta testing right now with a lot of our users on how we bring data connectors and Airbyte connectors into Notebook. And that goes back to what we were talking about before, which is for AI and building AI apps, is how do you get more flexibility in how you build. And I think just bringing these data connectors directly into Notebooks is going to be a pretty big deal. We announced it to our community, I think last Monday, and we have a pretty full wait list at the moment for experimenting with it. So we'll see what that gives us, but we're gonna talk a lot about it in the next few weeks. It's a new use case for us.
It's awesome. It's very cool. If you check that out, actually, sounds kind of cool.
I can send you a notebook as an example. It's a cool one.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Matt, anything you're stoked on this week?
Let's see. There's the Chill Data Conference coming up pretty quick, which you're going to be involved in, as you mentioned. So
yeah, I'm supposed to do the keynote tomorrow morning. So hopefully I am catching a red-eye flight to New York City tonight. And assuming my flight arrives on time, I will arrive on time to give a talk. And if not, then I guess you all have to figure it out. So, because airline travel is so predictable these days.
We'll send ChatGPT in your place.
You'll probably do a better job, actually. So It should be fun because we'll be seeing if you're at New York, NYC. I think we'll be in the Chelsea area. Come say hi to Matt and me and a bunch of other dorks there, and then we'll be at the Loki Happy Hour at Flannery's, a charming dive bar over in Chelsea. So it's, I actually like that place a lot. You go there more than I do, Matt. So then I think end of month, Matt and I will be in Switzerland, or that's like the first basically of March. Same thing at Verbier. So if you happen to be in Verbier, which I don't know why you would be, but if you happen to be there, come hit us up. So yeah, it should be fun. So awesome. Well, thanks for being on the show, dude. It's always good having you on the podcast. Like I said, we've done several podcasts at this point, and hopefully many more to come. I just like the way you think, and you're a good person. So yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime, dude. All right. Thanks to the audience. Great questions. And I do apologize on LinkedIn. None of the comments were showing up because LinkedIn borked again. So it's great. Data pipelines to the rescue. All right. Anyway, have a good one. And next week we have Scott Taylor for our special Valentine's Day edition, because I guess it's becoming a tradition for him to be on during Valentine's Day. So the love man himself, Scott Taylor, will be on the show. So anyway, see y'all soon. Bye.